Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board. Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations, and we do hope that these conversations can steer some reflective consciousness within you, the listener. With these conversations, we hope to open you to a new world of knowledge when it comes to digital sustainability, Nigeria's ecosystem in the tech space, and to also sort of introduce you to new tools, new trends when it comes to the digital landscape generally. I really do hope that you've enjoyed previous episodes and that you're looking forward to today's episode. I want to say thank you to the UK government that makes it possible for us to bring you this podcast series. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and it's such a pleasure to be your host. Welcome. So if you're curious about climate change, or you're just a tech entrepreneur, or a climate enthusiast, someone who's just trying to find your way around this very complex world of climate change, we do hope that these conversations can simplify, the themes, can make you understand some of these big jargons or grammars, as some of us really must admit that it is. And we just hope that in all of these conversations, you can also find a balance between your digital life and your commitment to a shared planet. The conversation today will focus around path to zero digital waste. I've always thought about it. Is it really possible that we can achieve zero digital waste? There are regulations, there are thoughts around compliance. How strong are these regulations? Are there best practices of where regulations has made it easy for countries to achieve, maybe not zero, but at least a very sizable measure of success when it comes to managing digital waste? All of these are the conversations that will ensue on this podcast today. My guest today is Mr. Oluyomi Banjo. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Mr. Oluyomi Banjo is an energy and environment and energy expert. Currently, he serves as the National Program Director for Energy and Environment with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. You probably know them as UNIDO. And he sort of works within the regional office that, coordinates Nigeria, but also the West African region. Such a pleasure to have him on this podcast. I was saying to him earlier that it's a little bit outside of his stuff of energy and environment, but I dare say he's an expert. He's someone I have known for over 5 years. I have followed his work, so I'm definitely confident that he can sort of throw a lot of insights and sort of introduce us to a new world of knowledge when it comes to path to zero digital waste compliance. I dare say that he also works closely to the government. So it's probably going to be an odd fit for him. Because maybe we can start with that. When we talk about compliance, there is always that pointing fingers to the government. It's their responsibility. But from where you sit, first, let me say welcome to the show again. Really, really glad to have you. But from where you sit, if you had to give us an outlook of Nigeria's digital waste landscape, what does it look like?
Thank you very much for having me on this program. And it's an interesting topic. It's a topic that is not common. So you bringing this up, I think you're opening up a new box of conversation for people to engage in. Now, going to your question, what does it look like? These are this is an area where, like I said, we haven't paid so much attention. But the fact is that it is there, the subject matter is there, and we must deal with it. And I will look at it from three distinct areas. One is people,
Okay.
two is processes, and three is technology.
So what does that mean? People, processes, technology.
Yes. So when we talk about people, these are the workforce, the experts, the operators, and these are the ICT experts, the environmental experts, the energy experts, working in this ICT digital space. Two is the processes. So what type of structure do we have for the digital space in Nigeria? What type of modus operandi are we employing in Nigeria? Three is the technologies. So now we have the technologies, we have data storage, data cloud. Nigeria is an ICT hub, is a digital hub in Africa. So what sort of equipments are we using, and how are all these managed? So these infrastructures, they are also, I will also group them, which is another class on its own, but I'll group it with the technologies. So
I'm curious to know, where does infrastructure comes in?
Okay, so
would it be processes, technology?
So infrastructure is a bit cross-cutting apart from people. So processes, technologies. So for example, infrastructures for data storage. So you look at it from the line of maybe like the clouds, and two, you look at it also from things like even to your external hard drives. So how do we manage all these things? So how do we protect the data? How do we manage the data? How do we manage the people? How do we manage the equipment and the technology?
Great. I mean, we'll get into the core of the conversation, which is around compliance. But before that, I also admit that I may have taken for granted the fact that some people are listening for the very first time. Like you said, it's not a stuff that people are familiar with. So if we could piggyback a little bit and sort of introduce the concept of zero waste. I mean, zero digital waste in this case. What exactly would you say that, how do you think people should understand the concept of zero digital waste?
Okay, so it's a bit complicated because it's a combination of ICT, the digital space, and the environmental space. Because you say digital and you say waste. So it's a combination. And when you say zero, now the world talks about net zero, talks about near zero. These definitions are a bit complicated, but they are clear. They are clear. So we zero digital waste should be seen simply as a way whereby we are able to manage the digital world through data management of both information, people, equipment, in a way that we are not generating any unwanted waste, and where possible, we are able to reuse any of these factors and parameters that I've mentioned, and we continue to have a value chain that goes round and round and round. So it's a circular economy approach.
Interesting. Yes.
Where we are avoiding waste. generally.
Absolutely. I'm smiling because you've thrown around some of these jargons. We might be familiar with it. Maybe some of the people that have interacted with climate subjects or environmental subjects are. You talked about, circular economy, near zero,
Net zero, yeah.
and maybe someone listening has to like take a pause and says, "Hey, Google, what does this mean?" But let's move on to talk a little bit about the role of businesses, which you hinted at. All of these infrastructures, it means that there are people behind it, like you rightly said, was stated as one of the three key components. And people drive businesses, people use gadgets, and as we see, particularly in Nigeria, that there is this thirst and knowledge to know about new tools, to explore new gadgets. Nigeria, I understand, as 6 out of the 9 unicorns on the continent, for example, and that means that a lot of digital activities, is a sort of progress is being made on the at least within the country or alongside, whatever is happening on the continent. But that also means, impact in terms of, some of these components from laptops to hard drives to, cooling systems, all of these different infrastructures that really make these things work. So how then do you assess, the role of businesses in driving towards zero digital waste?
Okay. So one is businesses must make conscious efforts to follow the policy and legal frameworks of the governments generally, because they are there to put a control and to sort of put a structure to how government intends to run these sectors in the country. When I say these sectors now, I'm talking about the digital space and the waste space. 2 is businesses must ensure that they continually pay attention to skills among their workforce. And we are seeing that Nigeria is a big hub, a digital hub in the African continent. Yeah. But how can we also really prove this in our businesses? Is through the show of skills. Number 3 is, how do we manage this equipment, these resources? How do we manage their end of life? So, for example, we have international conventions, protocols, and treaties that could also guide us.
Yeah.
One is the Basel Convention for the transboundary movement of hazardous waste, which looks at things like electrical and electronic waste, and also looks at components in your gadgets, your ICT gadgets. So, for example, you could have an equipment, even like your telephone, which would have over 100 different elements inside. Some are precious metals, some are hazardous. So how do we manage this? So, which also means that businesses must have a plan. They must have a plan for not just the development of their workforce, but for the management of this equipment during and at their end of life. So these are some of the things businesses have to take conscious efforts.
Great. My next question will be, just to echo this point you made that businesses must have a plan. We'll come to that in a bit. But I just also want to echo the 3 points you raised. First, that businesses must be conscious, aware, or knowledgeable about some of the existing framework, policy, government framework that guides the work that they do, the space they are getting into. You also talked about the need to, invest in skills and knowledge, as well as also the international framework and agreements that guides or sort of policies these things. But let's come back to I just imagine there is someone out there maybe is trying to run a business or hopes to run a business, and we see that many of these businesses have to rely on digital technology. They generate huge volume when it comes to data, and this also connects with the waste that comes out of that. And this is on the rise. We can't take that away, and we really want to see Nigeria become a lot more developed. You talked about plans. What do you think might be some proactive approach to eliminate digital waste? So if you think of it, think of me, for example, wanting to get into start a business in the digital space, and I acknowledge the fact that a lot of waste will be connected with this, but I do not know in any way some practical. If you could just put it in bullet points, what will you say are some practical approach that I should keep in mind to say, hey, if I want to take away or at least reduce digital waste, then I have to do 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so I'll take them from different angles. One is data storage, effective data storage. So if you effectively store data as a business, then you don't have to store the same data in multiple ways. This way, you manage the cloud, you manage the space. Two is identifying the right equipment for your digital works, for the digital space. So this also brings me to effectiveness of equipment. So it's like you going to the market and you want to buy a car, but you want to be doing a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
What you are looking for is what type of engine that can last for a long time, because you are going to be driving over a lot of kilometers.
Yeah.
So you need to buy the right set of equipment. So that is 2. 3, how do you have to have a plan for the end of life of your equipment. So there are now what we call the extended producer responsibility program in Nigeria, where they have registered collectors for the electrical and electronic waste. And there's a PRO, which is Producer Responsibility Organization, for this sector called EPRON. So you could go to their website and check for accredited collectors. So these are some of the things that you can do as a business. Yeah.
Thank you. This is very practical. I mean, you made it very simple. Be mindful of how you store your data. Be conscious about what gadgets you use, what equipment you use, and like you said,
end of life
management.
Yes,
think about what happens after. Think about what happens after your items have been used. Think about the end of life. You talked about EPR. You talked about EPROM. We've had them on the show or in one of our episodes. So feel free to check that out.
Then, so maybe I can also add that another thing is in identification of your equipment, you need to go for energy efficient equipment. This way, your digital equipment, you are avoiding energy waste as well. So you are using less energy and it means you are optimizing your systems, and you can still get what you want by using less energy. And that way you are spending less too as a business. So on energy, on data, on maintenance, and things like that.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Oluyomi Banjo. My guest today is Mr. Oluyomi Banjo. He works as the National Program Coordinator at UNIDO, the United Army responsible for industrial development. He coordinates or sort of oversees what happens in Nigeria, but also across the West African region. And we've been speaking about path to zero digital waste compliance in Nigeria particularly. I love how he sort of opened it up and made it very clear. Like you said, and I must admit, this is something that people are not very aware of. And with this podcast series, we hope to sort of introduce you to this new knowledge, to spark your curiosity, to see that you can learn a lot more. My next question to you, if we admit that, yes, we understand the need for this, we acknowledge that, hey, we really need to take some action. Is it enough for businesses to know that, or do we still need government to act as police? They put out these regulations, but then where comes the compliance, the enforcement to see that companies really do what is required of them?
Okay, so even within government, there are different roles. You have the policymakers and you have the regulators. So before I even go to the regulators, let me start from the businesses themselves. These businesses, they also have some sort of associations. The ICT association, car sellers association, this
I
association.
know CBAN, like a blockchain association also.
Exactly. It should start from there because their mandate should be to help their members and also equip them with knowledge while also helping them to adhere to government regulations. So those associations have to be well equipped with knowledge that they can transfer to their members, and they should be the first police of the businesses. If they are the first police, then it's easier for the businesses not to default with the government because the associations would have gotten to them before government gets to them. Then we now go to the government because government is to ensure that businesses adhere to the laid down to the existing policy frameworks. It is not enough to develop policies, regulations, all sort of legislations, but they are not implemented. I think that is a big part of the lack that we experience in Africa. So there should be monitoring arms, which are usually the regulators and maybe some monitoring departments of the key ministries. So, for example, NCC, National Communications Commission, has a responsibility to regulate the telecoms companies, making sure that they keep to the standards of the telecom sector. So, there's a responsibility for government to monitor and enforce these standards. If government does any sector that government doesn't do this, we always see what happens. But this must be done in a fair, just and equitable manner.
Great. I have never heard it this way. I mean, we know of organizations, for example, in the production or manufacturing sector, we know of MAN, and we just think of them as causing troubles for the manufacturers. But listening to this now, I really do think that with a stronger association that controls each of these sectors, maybe the digital space, the blockchain technology, the crypto space, then it's possible or it's easier for them to, like you said, first transfer that knowledge, sort of empower them, let them know, hey, this is what should be, this is how things should be approached. And then sort of police them to say, you can no longer be a member or you cannot be a member until you do this or do that. If you could just think broadly, are there some best practices that you've seen in other parts of the world, for example, that you think Nigeria could put into context and it might work for us when it comes to, compliance?
So, the best practices, polluter pays principles.
Let's simplify that. What's polluter pays principle for those who do not know?
So, when you don't adhere to the standards and the regulations, and your actions ends up affecting others and the environment, then you have an obligation to pay for the problems you are causing. So polluter pays principles, they are there, which it's quite common, especially in the Western world. So, 2 is the issue of the extended producer responsibility, which identifies sectors and develops producer responsibility organizations. And what this producer responsibility, what this
EPR,
extended producer. So what the producer responsibilities organizations do is they are like the middlemen between the producers and the government. So they sort of represent the value chain of producers, collectors, aggregators, and the government. So their responsibility is one, it also defines some industry standards. Two, sensitize their members on obligations to the government's policy frameworks. Three, serve as an advocate for the sector to the government. Four, carry out a lot of sensitization and awareness within the industry players and external players. And five, sometimes they could also offer financial aid to some of the members, either independently as an organization or through viable partnerships with financial institutions or development partners.
Interesting. And with that, you answered my last question, which is around, thoughts around strengthening collaboration between governments and private sector. And I think with those 5 points, you clearly have answered it. But maybe I can ask you a question that has been on my mind for quite a while. With the extended producers responsibility framework now, if I pick, a telephone, for example, and maybe with the brand, I can tell, okay, it's made from the US or from China or from Korea or wherever it is from. And I can tell, okay, this is the brand. We know some of the common brands. I wouldn't market for anyone. But at what point can a company in the US say that, hey, we know that we're responsible for this phone that is somewhere, in a village in Delta State, for example, or in a village in Jigawa State? Through what, I really don't know. I've been thinking about it. With plastic bottles, for example, we can say, hey, this plastic bottle belongs to this company and they should be responsible even if they are not. But we can call them out. But for companies that then ship, they have this international transfer of their products, what responsibility do they really have? Are there countries that enforces it such that whether it travels, hundreds of miles away from place of production, they are still responsible?
Okay, so countries adopt different strategies, but these strategies are easier to implement from country to country. So, for example, countries that have manufacturers in those countries, it is easier because there is direct interface. But for countries like Nigeria, using the examples of phones, majority of your phones are not produced here. They are imported into the country. Maybe the brands may now have brand offices, who are more of doing marketing,
or maybe repair services sometimes,
and repair services. So, but one of the strategies that is being imbibed by some countries that are not manufacturing countries is that at the point of entry of the importation into the country, there is a levy.
I see.
And that levy goes to, depending on how it's planned in that country, it's either it goes to a particular organization in government, or it goes to maybe as part of a venture fund, or goes to like the PRO under the EPR. That fund is to manage the eventual end of life of that product, because somebody has to pay for it. Because most of the products you are using presently, that cost is already factored into the cost you used in purchasing it. It's just that in many countries like Nigeria, nobody is retrieving that cost because the mechanism is not there between the manufacturers, the manufacturing country, and the country of recipient.
I see. I know I said that was my last question, but maybe I can delve a little bit. If we look at the plastic sector, for example, you know that we have innovations like EcoBatter, which you're very much aware of, and this reverse vending machine. And with this infrastructure, it makes it easy for people not just to cultivate this habit, but to feel incentivized. Listening to you now, I'm wondering, can we also have similar, infrastructure that makes people encouraged but also incentivizes them when they try to, for example, put away used digital items?
Yeah, and these are the things we call incentives, right? So how can we create incentives that encourages people to dispose or manage their ICT equipment in a responsible manner? So an example is a take back system, a take back scheme, whereby there are collection centers where I could take my old ICT equipment to, and maybe I pay a reduced sum of money and I'm given a new one. Then that center is responsible for managing the old one, either dismantling it to use it to in production of a new one, or use the components as a secondary raw material for another product. So this sort of incentives have to be encouraged. Or, for example, I use my ICT equipment, I take it back to a collection center, and I'm giving some sort of payment,
Financial remuneration.
either through maybe parameters like the weight of the equipment or the type of equipment or something. This way, we will stop indiscriminate dumping of ICT equipment and even data, and that automatically qualifies what we take back to those centers as not being waste anymore. But what you throw on the other side of the road in the bin is waste. But the moment you take it to somewhere that has a structure for managing it, then it's not waste anymore. So that way we are moving towards the zero waste concept.
Thank you so much. What a way to end this conversation. I could go on listening to you and picking on your brain, but I know you have to go, and I'm really grateful that you could make this work despite your very tight schedule. We're really grateful, Mr. Oluyomi Banjo, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks indeed. I've been speaking with Mr. Oluyomi Banjo, and it's really incredible to have learned from him. He is the National Program Coordinator for Energy and Environment at UNIDO, and that's the United Nations arm that coordinates industrial development, both in Nigeria, but also it covers across the West African region. And we've spoken about Path to Zero Digital Waste Compliance. Quite a lot to learn. If you've learned something new, why not share with your friends, share with people in your network. Don't be selfish. And like we said, we understand this is not a field that many people are aware of. And with this podcast series, we do hope that many more people can understand, not just understand, but also take, the required actions to see that we all make a difference in our little ways. Thanks again to the UK government through the Digital Access Program for making it possible for us to bring you this Greenbytes Wednesday podcast under the Scale Initiative. On this podcast, like I said when we started, for us it's about facilitating these critical conversations and hoping that you will have some reflective consciousness that then helps you to make better informed decisions as you engage with your digital life, but also balance it with your commitment to the shared planet, to our shared planet, I should say. That will be all for now. Thanks to the team, Ayo, Ajibola, wonderful, and everyone that has made it possible. Mary also, who's joined us today. Everyone that has made it possible, and for you who has been taking out the time to listen. Until the next time, I want to say thank you for your time and bye for now. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government. through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of Greenbytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. Bye for now.